This is Napa Sonoma Live. I'm Laura Levy, Executive Editor of Napa Sonoma Magazine, and our podcast is your virtual guide to the best things to see, sip, and savor on your next visit to wine country. This episode is made possible by Oakville Grocery, part of Boisset Collection, a portfolio of wineries and shops with deep historical and family roots. And once again, to introduce this episode, we are here at Oakville Grocery with Jean-Charles Boisset himself. So welcome back to tell us about your passion for coffee.
Bonjour. I've been so fortunate that my mother, back in Burgundy, has taken me to the market since I'm 3 years old. As early as I can remember, as much as I grew in a winery, and my bedroom was on top of the winery, so all the great sense of wine, going to the market with her, I sense always coffee smells. Why? Because at the French market, typically in Dijon, in the heart of Burgundy, the Campanini family was roasting right on site. And as they were roasting, they were giving you the beans.
Oh, so it smelled so fresh, and you took home the freshly roasted beans.
In the car, I was eating bread and obviously cheese as early as 10:30 in the morning, smelling the coffee, and I could identify the region. My mother's typical quiz was, is it Costa Rica? Is it Sumatra? Is it Ethiopia? Is it Zimbabwe?
That's young to know all that.
Well, granted, I was raised, making wine. So I learned coffee so early on that I probably drank coffee as early as hot chocolate.
Oh, well, starting at such a young age with the love for coffee and your knowledge of it, I'm anticipating something exciting is happening now.
Well, my dream has always been, to do our own coffee. So a few years ago at Atelier in Yonville, in a phenomenal gourmet shop, we started First Growth, really classified similarly to the Grand Cru, the Premier Cru, and the identification of wine within the world of coffee.
This is the name of your coffee.
It's called First Growth. Can you imagine?
Amazing.
Now, the idea with Oakville Roastery now is, of course, to bring the idea of an amazing signature blend that everybody would adore in the heart of Napa Valley and beyond. So we've taken several countries as a blend, from Ethiopia to Sumatra to Costa Rica to Java, and a few other great places around the world, and are creating our own roasted perfect blend. And for that, we met a wonderful young man that we've been knowing for a long time named Derek to help us roast and create the blend together. He and us have a very strong wine background, and we're utilizing, obviously, our knowledge of texture, aroma, length, and all the umami flavor that sits on your tongue that will bring the essence of coffee all the way to your body. So we're really excited that expertise of wine moving into coffee in the heart of Napa Valley.
Right, because we know we have the finest food products, finest ingredients, such wonderful wine, not such great coffee yet.
No, and Highway 29 deserves it. It
Absolutely.
cannot just be Cabernet and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It has to be as well the finest coffee in the world.
Having a little coffee with Jean-Charles has launched us right into episode number 3, about coffee and the wonderful nuances of coffee.
I'm Derek Bromley, founder of Ohm Coffee Roasters in Napa Valley, California.
Being that it's morning and we're sipping coffee, tell me a little bit about how you entered the world of coffee.
Sure thing, Laura. Well, I am a lifelong food and wine guy. I got my start, actually, my dad started the American branch of a French lace company way back in the day. And he brought with him a lot of appreciation for French food and wine culture. I can remember as a kid tiptoeing through the kitchen to make sure the blueberry souffle didn't collapse in the oven, and beef bourguignon and all sorts of various dishes that your average 70s kid in the outskirts of Philly was not getting exposed to.
Funny.
But translated that into really a lifelong career in food and wine. I had my first job as a busboy in a restaurant, the local fine dining Italian restaurant in the 11th grade. Ended up going to the hospitality program at Cornell University.
Okay.
And actually, that's where the first seed of coffee was planted for me. I had a guest lecture from Dr. Ely of Ely Espresso back in the mid-'90s, and had my first indication that, wow, like coffee had this whole science behind it, this seemingly simple thing of just putting hot water through some coffee grounds.
And that was back before there was this whole movement. There wasn't a Starbucks. There was not a Pete then, right?
Pre-Starbucks, pre-Starbucks ubiquity, right? And certainly pre-third wave, the craft coffee and the hipster kind of movement that's happened over the last decade or so.
So it sounds like you spent a good amount of your career not only in hospitality but also in wine, and we know that we have such a connection between the nuances of wine and the nuances of coffee.
That's right. That's actually the reason I'm in Napa Valley is that I moved out here for the wine business. I had been a sommelier in New York City, had worked for a number of restaurants there, and actually got moved out here by Domaine Chandon to launch their still wine program back right after Y2K.
Oh, okay.
So I have spent a lot of time here in this valley learning about wine, selling wine, marketing wine, and actually got to a point in my career where I was starting to think about what is the next logical step in my career. Is it going further up into the marketing realms and getting further and further away from the vineyards in the process, or potentially taking on a general management role, or potentially, but not really potentially, starting my own winery. And I say not really potentially because the barriers are just so high as a
different story
small
than
startup.
Roasting coffee beans and accessing beans have to be easier than planting grapes and nurturing. And
The turnaround on capital, you're talking about a matter of weeks, not a matter of years, if not decade or more.
So you also mentioned that you're a musician, and we were looking at the name of your coffee, Ohm, and I immediately think I'm going to meditate.
That's right. Well, it is actually the amplified reference. The OHM refers to Ohm's law, which is a law of, it's a sort of a relationship of electrical resistance. And in the music world, as a guitar player, all of my amplifiers have different ohm ratings, and depending on the speaker cabinet that I'm putting the signal through. It speaks a little bit more to the benefit of coffee, the amplification that it gives you.
Okay.
Though as a guitarist, I guess, I'm up on stage, I'm going up and having that moment in the spotlight, taking the solo, and I am kind of in my OM moment at the same time when I'm doing that.
Double entendre.
That's right.
I'm really curious about sourcing beans and roasting beans because, like you said, we have the big guys that dark roast everything. They always used to call Starbucks the HE double toothpick roasted. That's what the servers in restaurants would joke you about. They give you a hard time for ordering it. But I do like a dark roast coffee, but I find some of the new guys in town, they kind of put their noses up at dark roast, saying that you lose all of the nuance of the coffee, which is really the truth. That's
right. So, I guess you could argue a little bit of both. And I say that more because I came at coffee from a winery perspective, in the sense that there's such a thing as a flavor spectrum. When I was doing marketing, when I was thinking about launching a new brand, I put a lot of thought into who is my target consumer and what is the target flavor profile that I'm going for.
Okay.
Take a wine example, take Chardonnay as maybe the most ubiquitous example. One end of the spectrum, you've got Chardonnay from Chablis, from Champagne, sort of the leanest, heartiest, most acid-driven expressions, mineral-driven expressions of the grape. A couple years out of 10, you might not even get full ripeness with those wines. All the way on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the overblown, full-on, full-throttle version. Call it. I won't necessarily name names, but the Napa Valley version of the late '80s and early '90s. The kind of
big oaky, bold, buttery,
oaky, maybe slightly sweet, maybe not totally fermented dry, but just this lush, fully hedonistic experience that's driven more by the winemaker's influence than necessarily by the terroir. And if you go around the world and go around the world of winemakers, there's pretty much a style on that spectrum to fit every point along the way between Champagne and that classic style of Napa Valley Chard. In coffee, you really don't have that. You have more like a barbell.
It's not a true spectrum.
That's right. You have the Starbucks and the Pete's, the big, bold, over-the-top style where they're roasting extremely dark and pretty much at that point expressing almost all of the roaster's influence and very little of the origin or the site's influence.
Got it, like the terroir.
That's right.
As we say in the world of wine.
We say terroir and wine. I catch myself all the time going back and forth between the two. They say origin and coffee. It means essentially the same thing. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the craft movement of the last decade or so. They call it the third wave movement as well. It's folks like Blue Bottle and Ritual and Equator. They're almost like the backlash to the Starbucks and the Pete style. They're the ones sort of saying it's all about terroir. It's all about the origin and expressing the perfect characterization of what this bean and what that site was all about. I came at the coffee business with that winemaking perspective and thinking about, wow, why do we necessarily have to choose a camp of one or the other? Your average coffee bean is 10 or 12% starches that can be converted into various forms of sugars. There is a lot of hedonism to be had in your average bean of high quality. You don't necessarily have to choose the path of just the lean, tart, bright style of the third wavers or the style of the purely hedonistic of the Starbucks and Pete's folks.
Okay, well, this is exciting to know there is something in between.
There is actually something in the middle, yes. So that was one of my founding philosophies coming into coffee was, wow, I saw the unoaked Chardonnay movement of the last year or so, a decade or so. And, there it was all about let's have $10 or $20 naked, Chardonnays or wines in general. And oftentimes what you found was like just a little bit more of the winemaker's influence would have made an exponentially better wine. Those wines didn't necessarily benefit from being stripped down of all their makeup or all their,
a little touch wouldn't be bad.
That's right.
Which is like in coffee as well. A little touch of roasting might bring out some more nuance rather than what they always say is, oh, you taste all the citrus and then this or that.
That's right.
Of the light roast, but you lose out on some more of the subtleties of roasting, right?
Another wine analogy I like to use is that the third wavers, I equate a lot of what they're doing to Gruner Veltliner is a great example. The Psalms love to drink Gruner Veltliner. I love a great Gruner Veltliner because I've spent a lot of time developing my palate. I understand. I appreciate the acid. I don't necessarily pucker as much, but I appreciate the balance that Gruner Veltliner has. What I'm trying to do is a little bit more of Sonoma Coast Chard or Napa Valley Cab, where there is an awful lot of site and origin happening, but there's a little bit more accessibility to it. It's accessible to a broader audience. I'm not necessarily talking as much to the roasting and the coffee community as I am with my style of roasting. And
then do you source beans from all over the world as well?
I do, yes. Yeah, so I work with a handful of importers here in the U.S. It's a little bit different supply chain from wine. If you think about wine, I don't know what the right number is, but there's probably thousands to a small number of tens of thousands of grape growers in the entire world. Right, the entire supply chain of wine. Maybe there's 20,000 vineyard owners, 50. I don't know what the right number is. But with coffee, you're talking about millions of farmers that are out there, and possibly even tens of millions.
Is there smaller growers?
Much smaller, yes. A coffee farm could be a 10 by 10 backyard of a local farmer that takes his or her harvest to the local washing station that gets blended up and up and up and into lots of coffee that make their way over to the U.S. or to the rest of the world.
Then do certain types of coffee beans take better or worse to particular roasting? Like some call out to be light roasted and others, you're better off dark roasting?
Yes, there's a bit of that. I mean, in general, the higher you go in elevation, the denser the beans are. And the denser the beans are, there are two things that happen. One is that they've got more acidity to them. And the other is that because they're denser, they can stand up to the roasting process a little bit better, so they can go a little bit darker. Doing low elevation, lower quality beans at a darker roast level, you're going to lose a lot more flavor a lot more quickly. I like to start with a bit more acid in the beans to begin with because then I have a lot more control. Through the roasting process, I can cook off acid to the right amount to have those roasts be within balance with each other.
So your theory now is that more people that drink coffee really would rather be in between the two extremes?
I think there's something to be said for both, but there's also something lost on both extremes. Right. The darker style, you lose so much of the expression of the site, but also it creates, from the roaster's perspective, it's sort of like, why buy the high quality beans? Because you're cooking off so much of the nuance of it. You can actually use a lot of filler. You can use even Robusta beans or other lower quality things to go in there because that consumer is only really looking for that hit of kind of burnt, tarry, saddle leather, what have you. And actually, it's done a bit of a disservice to the coffee drinkers here in the U.S. because the next thing you do when you order one of those coffees is you put milk in or you put your pump of syrup in or sugar or whatever else. You mask the flavor of that coffee. My basic philosophy is that when you have a cup of my coffee, it should taste the same way that it smells.
Right, because most people walk into a coffee shop or brewing coffee in your kitchen, and people go, oh, the smell of coffee. I love the smell. I just don't like the taste.
Yeah, it's intoxicating, right? That smell is just overwhelming.
So you're matching the taste to your aroma.
But so often the way that the bean actually is roasted, what ends up in the cup is something so much less in terms of what the flavor is that actually delivers on the palate.
So you will be delivering your beautiful product that pleases everybody.
That's right.
Right here, next door at Oakville Grocer.
That's right. So Jean-Charles and I had a number of conversations. He and I have known each other better part of a decade just through the wine business. And so when he found out that I had started down the coffee path, he was very interested. Being a Frenchman, he knows his coffee very well, and he has big ambitions in coffee as well. So it made a lot of sense for us to get together and really talk about how do we take Oakville Grocery's coffee up to the next level. We're in a mecca, right? We're in the middle of Napa Valley where people are coming from all over the world for food and wine experiences, yet we haven't figured out how to deliver great coffee experiences. So thankfully, Jean-Charles has just agreed to spend an awful lot of money on equipment to get the top-of-the-line La Marzocco machines into his properties. I'm training his staff to get the proper coffee execution, do the little latte art and beautiful rosettas on top of the coffees.
Because there's something to be said for the artisan, your barista, right?
That's right. The barista is such a critical component of awesome, I like to say, extraordinary coffee experiences. That's what my company is all about. If you go to other parts of the world, Australia is a great example. Their coffee culture is just such a different level from where we are here. Really? You go into the airport, and the coffee in the airport is better than 90% of what you will get across the U.S.
Amazing.
And so much of that is that last few feet of delivery, about the barista knowing just the basic fundamentals of how to properly extract brewed coffee from grounds and hot water.
And does that have to do with exact temperature of the water and the amount of time it extracts?
Yeah, it's deceptively complex. There are a lot of layers to it. But in reality, if you train properly, it's not that complicated to do right. The problem is that so much of the equipment that's sold here in the U.S., your basic K-cup, as an example, those parameters are not adhered to. Coffee needs to be extracted at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit with the water, plus or minus 5. So 195 to 205 degrees. Okay. For the most part, the tests I've seen of your average K-cup brewer, it's getting the water up to maybe 185 degrees.
No wonder I never liked those K-cups.
Right.
I've resisted. I don't do it. Can't do it.
Your average extraction time should be about 4 minutes. The K-cups do it in about 30 seconds. Your ratio of grounds to water should be about 1 part grounds to 15 parts water by weight, give or take. You can play with that once you're in that range. But a K-cup is about half of that ratio.
Okay.
So, a lot of these just basic fundamental components aren't adhered to for the home coffee enthusiasts, let alone, even out in restaurants and otherwise.
Well, I think the whole Napa Valley will be thrilled that right at the heart of the center of it in Oakville, right, you can get the best cup of coffee.
That's right. Jean-Charles and I were talking about the placement here right on the highway. There is not a cup of coffee at this level for miles and miles in either direction.
Well, we'll be greatly welcomed, considering we have so many connoisseurs of fine food, fine wine. These people also love coffee, right?
That's right.
And it's an international crowd.
It's only a natural extension of that Epicurean experience that they're having here in Napa Valley.
It's been wonderful talking to you, Derek. It's such a pleasure to learn the ins and outs of making fine coffee and understanding the whole array and nuance of roasting coffee beans and accessing them. And it's most exciting that we'll be able to get the best cup of coffee right here in Oakville.
Glad to be here.
So as we end each episode, Derek, we will ask you, are you getting hungry?
I am starving.
Okay.
The coffee time is worn out and it's time for food.
Okay, so the question we're going to ask you is, what will you have for lunch today next door at Oakville Grocery?
It's a tough choice every time I look at that menu, but I've got to say I'm a sucker for that cold fried chicken sandwich. Ooh. So delicious.
Okay, cold fried chicken it is for Derek Bromley of Ohm Coffee. Thank you for joining us. Before we go, as always, what wine are we tasting today, Jean-Charles?
2 unbelievable wines. The first one is JCB 33 Chardonnay. So purposely bringing our Oakville Grocery in Hillsburg into play. Why this wine is prominently displayed there, it's the JCB 33, which brings the energy of the Russian River, the illumination, the style, the elegance, and the power. It's the most Burgundian style wine.
It is Burgundian because while there's oak, I feel the oak, but I feel like it's in balance with the acidity.
That's right. And why 33? I was 33 years old when we bought our first vineyard in the Russian River, which was my dream since the age of 11. So I could not resist to make a wine that makes me think of Burgundy, but it's truly California. The other wine, of course, Chateau Buena Vista, the first California winery.
History there.
The essence. So what could you enjoy better but the oldest winery in California with the oldest grocery store in California? So this is the two married together. This is our 100% Cabernet. Is purple gold in your glass. 26 months on oak. And this is one of the best Cabernet really represented about what America is all about.
Well, let's take a sip. Did we learn a lot about coffee from Derek today, Jean-Charles? That was
Absolutely.
amazing.
Incredible, isn't he?
Yeah, actually, I find it so fascinating to liken wine to coffee, and that he's a former somm and you're a winemaker, and you both have that passion for coffee. I'm very excited to try your blend that you're doing together with him. It's delicious.
Well, this is so exciting because this is the time and the opportunity to show to the coffee farmer as much respect as we have shown to the grape grower. Coffee is so similar, and we deserve to have the best beans, the best roasting, and the most incredible blend in our cup. And I really believe from Africa to obviously South America to all the rest of the world, the best beans are ending up with us, and we're creating the signature blend that will create magic into your cup.
And what I loved that Derek discussed was how these are small family coffee farmers. These are not conglomerates. And I thought that was fitting in with your philosophy. I mean, these are hundreds upon hundreds of small bean growers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're here to encourage growers. We're here to encourage perfection and a sense of excellence. We're here to encourage handcrafted and support families to help them, obviously, to blossom and to become greater in the world of coffee. So we are thrilled to bring all those great coffees from all over the world and bring them to all our guests.
Well, thank you again, Jean-Charles. Wonderful conversation, and the coffee is extraordinary, worth a stop to get your jolt of caffeine. And thank you all for listening. Please hit that little subscribe button so you can get each of our upcoming episodes directly to your podcast feed. And pick up our Napa Sonoma magazine if you'd like more wonderful stories on wine country, the people, the places, the foods, and the wine in print. Feel free to share our podcast episodes across your social media channels. Thanks again for joining. It's Laura Levy. Until next time.